John Berlau is an award-winning financial journalist who has worked as a staff writer for the Investor's Business Daily. He is now the director of the Center for Investors and Entrepreneurs at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Mr. Berlau discusses the burdens of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act and how Sarbanes-Oxley relief could be a hidden key to economic recovery. So, what is the Sarbanes-Oxley Act?
The Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 was passed in response to the Enron scandals and the tech bubble, but it has not achieved its goals of preventing scandal, achieving honest and more understandable accounting, and the costs of Sarbanes-Oxley have hit legitimate entrepreneurs and are hindering our current recovery. It made companies, instead of look at something like the books that are relevant to shareholders, has instead been like the Accountants Full Employment Act and has tripled the costs of companies to be public in things like accounting fees and documentation, and has accountants looking at things that have very little to do with accuracy for shareholders, such as who has the office keys and how many letters are an employee password. Those are actual documented cases. And it's made a lot of companies go private, and the average IPO market cap of a public company has gone from something like 50 million to 250 million. So a lot more companies don't have the option of going public, even when debt markets are closed.
But don't we need Sarbanes-Oxley in light of recent market shenanigans?
It focused on all these trivial risks and occupied board of directors' time with compliance duties and sort of a checking the box mentality. And at the same time, boards were overlooking bigger risks such as subprime securities and just the overall risk of business strategy. So not only did it add costs, it didn't deal with the problem of how you value certain types of assets.
Wouldn't repealing Sarbanes-Oxley now be a reward to Wall Street?
Well, what was funny was that Wall Street did pretty well after Sarbanes-Oxley was passed. The established firms like Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Bear Stearns, all did businesses. They did mortgage-backed securities. Who it hurt were some of the smaller entrepreneurs, medium-sized companies who couldn't go public. The co-founder of Home Depot, a gentleman named Bernie Marcus, had said that he never could have gone public if Sarbanes-Oxley had been in place when Home Depot went public in 1981. But now, Google was $1 billion company before it went public, so it's making a lot of these companies reliant on the debt markets, and the debt markets have just become too crowded, as we've seen. But because of the cost of Sarbox, they don't have the equity market, the stock market, as an option either.
Why is repealing Sarbanes-Oxley even relevant now? It's not like many people are enthused about the stock market.
But there are millions of investors, risk takers, and there's a saying that the stock market is having a sale. So, and people watch shows like Jim Cramer's Mad Money and try to find a bargain. Know that they're taking a risk, and but want to invest in a company that could potentially give them a great return. In past recessions, such as the early '90s recessions, IPOs have actually served as a substitute for debt. During the early '90s downturn, when we had a similar situation, not quite as severe, with a credit crunch, where 3,000 savings and loans failed, where you had the end of the leveraged buyer's market, and you had a similar credit crunch, then IPOs actually went up. IPOs, initial public offerings, more than doubled at the beginning of the decade, from 109 issues in 1990 to 259 in 1991, according to Forbes magazine. Then they soared to 415 in 1992 and 540 in 1993. Now, among the stock offerings in the early years, even though we were having a recession, were Cisco Systems in 1990 and Starbucks in 1992. So the ability to issue equity as a substitute for debt back then was helped ride out the recession and get to a recovery a lot sooner. Unfortunately, now the smaller companies, the medium-sized companies, don't have that option because of the costs of Sarbanes-Oxley, and that's what we have to change. Sarbanes-Oxley, may have lessened individual risk, but by making making so many businesses as well as other borrowers rely on debt for financing on top of the other things going on in the credit market, you could say actually contribute to the credit market problems. And the key to recovery is allowing equity as an option, the stock market as an option, in some sort of perhaps an exemption for smaller public companies, so that companies can still expand and create jobs. If we don't do that, if we don't do something about the Sarbanes-Oxley problem, we're going to have a much longer recession and a much slower recovery. So they say it's not deregulation or re-regulation, but smart regulation. Sarbanes-Oxley is an example of dumb regulation, and it needs to be severely overhauled.